And we're back for the second episode of the pre-admission game. How are you doing this afternoon, Mitch?
Yeah, I'm really well, thanks, Aaron. And yourself?
Oh, fantastic. It's good to be back in the studio, recording again.
Recording again.
Not cancelled yet, that's good news.
And hello to those of you that are listening at home. Maybe you're on the bus, or on the train, tram if you're in Melbourne, or on a ride doing something, nice for yourself, hopefully. Hopefully you're out of lockdown.
Wishing you a good day at uni or a happy holiday, I suppose, if that's when you're listening to this podcast.
But, today's actually a really special day because we're joined by someone. Who are we joined by today?
We're joined by Victoria, who is an ANU medical student. Isn't that right, Vic?
Yeah, that's right.
Brilliant. And can you tell us a little bit about yourself, Vic?
Yeah, so I'm a first year at ANU this year. I did my undergrad. I'm originally from Melbourne. Did my undergrad at Melbourne Uni, did a Bachelor of Science, and then an honours year in microbiology and immunology. And then last year I decided 2020 was going to be my year to travel the world. So unfortunately that didn't go too well for me with COVID.
So how far did you get?
About a 5-kilometre radius outside my house. So I think that's a big part of why I actually wanted to move interstate, and I was pretty up for a move.
Yeah, so you're a first year ANU student, aren't you? And what's that like for you?
Yeah, so it's been really fun. It's still pretty surreal, like when we're learning these new skills like physical examinations and stuff. It's still a bit surreal, like that this is happening. Because I did have to try quite a few times to get in. It wasn't a very natural process for me.
You've got that classic, medical student imposter syndrome that everyone gets sort of in first year. We're like, oh my God, here we go.
And have you found it? So, I guess we have to talk about, first of all, the challenges of actually being in medical school, which I'm sure are numerous. But also, you had to move from Melbourne, where you grew up here, right?
Yeah, I grew up in Melbourne. I lived in the same house for my whole life, so it was very weird to move.
Okay, and so how have you found that? Because Canberra is, it's not exactly what I think of as a big town. It's not necessarily a big travel destination. It's mainly students and politicians, isn't it? Yeah,
it's so different. And I didn't really know much about Canberra, but I always had like a slight concern that I'd heard it was a bit quieter. And it definitely is. And so I did actually, when I first moved here, I think I was so excited to just be doing med that I was, very optimistic. And I didn't really go in, I just thought, I'm in med, like that's amazing, that's everything. But after being here for a few months and settling in, I sort of started to miss sort of my old lifestyle of, going out for coffee dates quite late and, going out on the weekends a lot more, whereas things close early and it's just a bit quieter. And I just sort of made an effort to surround myself with people who were up to do things. And even if it's a bit different to what I used to do, it's gotten a lot better.
Looking at it now on net, would you say that it's been worth it, sort of moving from Melbourne to study medicine elsewhere?
Definitely, yeah. And even when I was going through that struggle of like, I miss Melbourne, I still knew I wanted to stay because it was to do what I've always wanted to do. And there's a lot of good things about living here as well. So I think once you settle in and just get used to the differences, like it is a really nice place to live. So yeah.
Speaking of living at ANU, there's also the study, of course. So I guess we'll get right down into the meat of things and ask you about the nitty-gritty of the ANU medical program. Because, what we're going to be talking about for the next couple of episodes is that a lot of the medical schools are a little bit different, and we had this weird shoe and foot analogy in the last episode where you talked about, it's about picking the right med school for you. So can you tell us, broadly, what is the medical program at ANU like? What do you do throughout the years? How do you advance through it?
Yeah, so I guess it's like the 2-in-2 approach where you do 2 years of preclinical study and then 2 years of clinical study. So for the first 2 years, it's structured so that you'll spend about 4 days of the week, attending lectures, pracs, PBLs, so just like tutes basically, where you get taught all of the content that you need to know. And then 1 day of the week is spent at the Canberra Hospital where you get taught clinical skills by clinical skills tutors who are all clinicians.
Wow, and that's in first year, is it?
Yeah. So we started that in our first week, which was pretty exciting.
Jeez, that's insane.
So what was it like being that would have been your first Friday, right? So first Friday, first week in a hospital, first year medical student. What was that like?
It was so weird. And we all got given a stethoscope. We got presented with a stethoscope like for free.
Whoa.
That
I
had
didn't
like
get
a
that in
Yeah. Was it drug
engraved
company
on it.
sponsored or?
I don't know. But I was like, and then I did a photo shoot. Like,
Yeah, so
I
just
was make the most of it.
yeah. For those playing from home, just for reference, I don't know if any of you have been stethoscope window shopping, but those things are not cheap.
They are not cheap
Like
at
a
all.
few $100,
Jeez.
anywhere between $100 to $300. So
Cash money bags.
this could be
ANU
an
University.
ANU selling point, exactly, if we're pitching ANU programs to people. Anyway, sorry, so you were presented with a stethoscope, you had the photo shoot. Yeah, keep going.
Yeah, not everyone did have the photo shoot. People were kind of watching me like, what is this girl doing? But I didn't care. Yeah, we basically jumped right in and started learning about how to take a history. So yeah, we learned different skills each week. So whether it be physical examinations or like learning how to do focused histories like with a focus on alcohol or sexual history or whatever it is. Even in our first week, they brought in like the simulated patients to be our actors and everything. It was honestly really cool.
That's fantastic. With the program, so going back to, yes, we've talked about the first week and you're getting lectures, I'm assuming, at other points during the week. How's your course going to change then over the coming years?
In third year, you can apply to join the rural stream. So I think about a third of the cohort can do that, where they can then put in a preference for what location they want to go to, and it will be in rural New South Wales, sort of in the surrounding region of Canberra, where they will have the full year in a rural location. So that's an option if you're interested in that. And I would say a pretty large proportion of our cohort does come from a rural background. And even if you're not from a rural background, like it is pretty appealing. They say you get a lot more hands-on experience that way. And so we even went on a little rural week earlier in the year where everyone went to a location for a week and they showed us like the facilities and let us do fun things to try and sell it to us. So that was pretty fun.
Did they bring out the pastries?
Yeah. Oh, they went all out. I went to a winery. People were meant to go surfing. Like it's pretty good. But yeah. And so, you can do the rural the rural year, but if you don't want to do that, everyone will do a 6-week rural placement in third year regardless.
Yep.
Otherwise, you'll be rotating through either the Canberra Hospital or Calvary Hospital in Canberra.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's very different, I guess, in some of the bigger unis, like say in Melbourne, where all of the cohort will be sort of divided, whereas here everyone goes through the same hospital. So it's, I guess, a lot smaller and a lot more, like you're just a lot more in touch with your cohort, I suppose, because like literally everyone's in the same hospital.
And just on that, how many people are there in your cohort?
So I think normally there's just over 100. This year we weren't able to have many international students, so we've got about 90. And I was actually a bit worried, would that be too small? But it's not. I think it's actually a really nice amount because I know everyone's name and you see everyone around and you switch up toots and PBLs and you meet everyone, and it's actually a really nice culture.
Reflecting on my experience at Melbourne Uni, I would certainly say that that's a fantastic thing because there are people that I meet on the wards as a final year medical student, and I'm in the hospital now every day, and you meet people and you're like, oh, is that a medical student? Is that an intern? Is that a junior doctor? Because you just don't know everybody, so you do feel a little bit disconnected from your cohort across all of the clinical sites. Speaking of the clinical sites, just one more question for those sort of interested in the infrastructure side of things. What's Canberra Hospital like? Are there lots of departments, lots of doctors? How do the staff treat you? What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so I mean, I am only a first year, so I don't know too much about it. But from what I've seen, it does seem to have pretty good infrastructure because Canberra Hospital is where all of these surrounding regions, like the New South Wales regional towns and everything, will send people. So Canberra Hospital is sort of like the hub, I guess. I think it does seem to have pretty good infrastructure. And there's also another hospital called Calvary where people will go and do rotations, I guess, if there's not space or the facilities at Canberra Hospital. So I know people do sometimes also go there. And in terms of the culture, it does seem pretty good because we're getting a lot of lectures and also having clinicians from that hospital do our clinical skills tutorials. And they all do, it does seem to be quite a supportive culture so far.
So it's nice to see that, sort of the environment is supportive of the students, that clinicians go out of their way to give those tutes.
And so you've told us that it seems to be a really close-knit cohort. What would you say are the other sort of values and sort of insider knowledge that you have about the university's culture that would be useful to a person who's thinking about going to ANU?
Yeah, I think the culture is really great. Like, for example, when we first started and had our orientation week, there were two reps in the year level above us who organised the whole week for us. So we got to know them really well. And then even like just as we've moved through the weeks, we've got second years who will like volunteer to run either via Zoom or in person, like preparation tutorials for our OSCEs, or like if we did like the cranial nerves, which is like pretty difficult, like cranial nerve nuclei and stuff like that. And they would run a Zoom session on that for us, just to help us before our exam, even though they had their exams around the same time. So it is actually really supportive, where the students in the year above really look after the students in the year below. And then it's sort of a culture where you have to do that for the year level below you, because that's what we've done for you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly.
And then, so is your learning structure in the uni a PBL type thing, or how does it work?
Yeah, we do PBLs. So we are doing them now so that they line up with the block that you're doing. So we just started doing like cardio resp, and so the PBLs will line up.
And so for those of us listening at home, a PBL is problem-based learning, which pretty much means that you come together as a small group with a facilitator and work through cases and refine your sort of clinical reasoning skills in that way. And then the block style as well is another one, I think similar to you, Sid, and I think Melbourne does a similar thing where you're thinking about neurology, and you just tackle neurology for a period of time rather than jumping between different topics, which is what certain other universities tend to do with the spiral learning method, which we'll get to in other episodes.
Yeah. The PBL learning method, if you're a Fraser student, you'd be very, very familiar with it, because it's exactly the same thing that we do in our sort of biology, chemistry, section 1, section 2, really all of them. The sort of group-based, interactive, supervised learning that's focused on problems. Because as we mentioned last week, medicine is so expansive. It's impossible to book learn it. It's much more fun, much more practical, and really much more useful to focus on solving problems rather than memorizing Grey's Anatomy.
And you pick up professional skills and communication skills during the class without them overtly having to teach them to you as well, which is really valuable as well.
So apart from the pay it forward culture, just one more thing that we wanted to ask. From a university, like from a university administration perspective, how all of those universities have like the value set, like these are the things that are important to us. Off the top of your head, are there any particular values that you think the university emphasizes that would be relevant to a person, trying to pitch their interview appropriately, or maybe just thinking about if the values of the program are relevant to them?
I think one thing that definitely attracted me towards ANU was their research focus. I know that ANU just generally is quite renowned for their research as a uni, so that's something that sort of got me interested in the first place. And we actually already have organised our research projects that will run sort of through second year, concurrently to doing all of our other studies. So, and I think in second year you have one day off to do your research project each week.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, and you can do that as a clinical project, using data from the hospital, or you can do something in the lab, which is what I'm going to do, or you can do, for people who aren't of a science background, which they do actually really encourage people to apply if you're from a different background. They have an affiliation with the National Gallery of Australia, where we went and did days there, and we looked at paintings and artwork and sort of talked about them with like people who work at the gallery, and then linked it to medicine. And it was actually, we were kind of a bit like, why are we here? But it was actually really, really good. Do a research project through the gallery if you want to.
So fantastic. Wow.
Yeah, they're so flexible about it. You can do really whatever you want. So they do have a big research focus as well. And I know I talked about that a lot in my interview because I really enjoy research.
Yeah. And that's important that you mention that, because people don't realize how top-notch ANU is on a global scale, like not just within Australia, but it's a very politically important university, and hence it gets a lot of funding and a lot of support.
They have money for stethoscopes, I hear.
Money for free stethoscopes, apparently. God, I'm a little bit salty about it. I can't believe I bought one. So should have just gone to ANU. And this thing that you're talking about in terms of the gallery, that's also very important. I think Melbourne does something similar during our psychiatry rotation, but only for a very short period of time. So there are certainly very much, the sort of art in medicine, the communication aspect of medicine, which is critical to learn, and that's one of the ways that it's taught. And finally, I think and Mitch, maybe you can echo this. As a final year student, I was really only introduced to real research in the medical sphere at the end of third year and through fourth year. And the fact of the matter is that, first of all, to progress in any medical specialty at this point, you do need to publish and you do need to know how to do that.
We talk about publish or perish.
Yeah, exactly, publish or perish. But more to the point, you need to write research in order to understand how to interpret data. It's not just about, hitting up Amboss, hitting up, Armando on YouTube and learning the facts.
Although we love those
although they
resources.
are fantastic resources and I can vouch for them, right? But it's going to get to a point where you will have to make decisions in the gray zone, and those decisions can only come from interpreting data. So you need to learn that. And I think there is a huge bonus to starting research early and sort of pacing it through your degree rather than maybe
like
focusing
smashing out.
smashing it out.
I mean, there's arguments to both because we definitely do our research concurrently with study, but it seems to just fall by the wayside for a lot of people at my uni in particular, at Notre Dame, until the last minute. And I'm just about to submit my MD project in the next few days, and I'm thinking, oh my goodness, I wish I had a day off a week in second year to go and really get to grips with it and give it a good hit. But enough about me. I suppose now we want to shift the conversation over to thinking about the interview, because ultimately a lot of our listeners will be, prospective medical students. They might have just done the GAMSAT. They might be thinking about doing the GAMSAT. Or they might be, preparing for an ANU interview, which would be really relevant. We just want to ask you a few questions about the ANU interview generally. Starting with something like, how did you feel on the day, and how did they make you feel coming up to the interview?
I guess this is quite a unique experience because I did it last year when it was all online, and I'm assuming that it will likely be online again, although I'm not sure if that's confirmed. But if it is similar to the way that it ran last year, it was actually different to other unis in that ANU run both an MMI and a panel interview. And so because of that, it was actually split over 2 different days. So it was double the stress.
Oh, jeez. So you can't even have it all happen at once, forget all about it afterwards and then think, oh my gosh, well, at least that's over now. You had to sort of sit back, mull over what you'd done correctly or incorrectly was it the MMI first or the panel?
MMI first.
Jeez. So you did the MMI, which is that mixed multi-mini interview, multiple mini interviews before then going into the panel interview, which for other listeners at home is when you're essentially doing a traditional interview with 4 or so people, examining, how you are able to conduct yourself, managing relationships with different people and building rapport with 4 or 5 people at one time, which can, it needs a different skill set altogether to the MMI. It's a bit of a different beast. Would you say that's accurate, Vic?
Yeah, definitely. So basically what happened in my year was we did the MMI over an online platform that basically would sort of flash the question up on the screen, and then you had a countdown, and then you're going, oh my God, the camera would turn on, and then you had a short window of time to answer. It would repeat until the interview was over. So it was very artificial and very different to a real in-person MMI because you weren't getting any feedback from another person. Even if the other person is putting on a stern face, at least you can sort of look them in the eyes and interact with them. Whereas in this case, you're literally just looking at the screen. So I had to practice like looking into the camera instead and just getting comfortable just talking to myself basically. So that was that portion of it. And then on another day, they had the panel part of it. So we really didn't know what to expect with this at all, except for that it was going to be held over Zoom. I remember I opened up my laptop, I went onto Zoom, and it was like literally the most tense waiting room you have ever been in. Like I entered the waiting room and I was like pouring with sweat, like I was very scared. And then I see them like letting me in and I was like, I don't even want to enter this room. Like I was so scared. And then the first thing they said to me was, oh, by the way, it's showing me that your internet connection is really bad, but don't worry about it.
And you're like, oh, brilliant.
I was like,
oh dear.
And I was just like, oh, okay. But yeah, so in the end, they basically just had, for this year, they just had 2 people as examiners and then 1 person just as sort of a technical helper. And then but they were really nice. The technical person said, don't worry about it. If anything technical happens, we'll just let you back in and we'll just resume. You don't need to stress about it. So that was actually really comforting. I had the two examiners, and I think one was being more stern and one was being more nice. And I was just trying to tell
good cop, bad cop routine.
Yeah, I was like, don't worry about the bad cop. Don't worry about the bad cop. And then they were asking questions, and obviously I at least got a bit more of that interpersonal skills that I was trying to convey. So that was, I think, a positive.
Yeah, fantastic.
Absolutely. I think it's interesting that they went for the recording without the person on the live end, on the other end, sorry. We had a similar experience this year when applying for jobs, and I think we really need to emphasize this to whoever is listening to the podcast, that it is very challenging to do an interview where you have nobody to play off on the other end.
It's a different style of interview, really.
Completely different.
And I think
really.
It demands different preparation as well as a result.
Absolutely.
We've gone from we need to prepare for in-person, panel interviews to in-person MMI interviews to now, these weird online interviews where you may or may not have an examiner that you can interact with.
Exactly.
And as you were saying, Vic, I think you picked up on some brilliant points about having to look into a camera, and it seems very unusual, especially when we're sort of used to maybe looking at people on the Zoom screen who are sort of off to the side or anything. You're looking dead into the camera at this big sort of dot. and it's so important that you're able to convey body language and really get put your best foot forward.
That's the thing. It's interesting that you mentioned body language, because I find that so much communication in an interview happens because you reach a mutual understanding. You might, have a particular reflection, you might make a gesture with your hands, and you'll communicate extra meaning, extra emphasis. But you can't do that when you have nobody to communicate to. So what I found when I was sitting on my job interview this year is that I felt very time pressured, because I felt like I had to articulate every little bit of information. Vic, did you feel like there was a bit of time pressure? There was the timer on the screen, right, running out. How did you go with that?
Sometimes I would be talking, and I'm just watching that number go down, and I'm trying to keep the smile on my face and seem peppy, but I'm just watching that number. And it's true, because in person, they might let you just finish off that sentence. Like they might give you that leeway, but in this, it will cut you off. So you really did have to adjust to that timer. Like you needed to look at it and really wrap it up. And I think one time I let it cut me off and I was like, damn. But I think another really important thing as well is, even if you have a bad station, is to just take that however many seconds they give you in between and just let go and just get ready for the next one.
Yeah, that's a really important point with all MMIs, isn't it? You've got all of these stations that are really in isolation. So if you stuff one up, it's good just to take a breather and then reset for the next one, because it doesn't have to set the tone for the rest of your interview at all.
And Vic still got in, right? You got in, and you ran out of time on one of the stations. And I think I've run out of time on an MMI, Mitch. I'm sure that you've run out of time.
I've definitely run out of time.
It's so common, so common.
I just remembered, like, another thing I had this plan in my head that, if it was a real situation, every time you walk into the room, you would sort of smile and go, hi, my name's whatever. So I was like, I'll do that, even though it's on this online platform and there's no one in the room. And it's probably the same person watching every video. I was like, I'm still going to do that. But then I forgot midway through, and also I couldn't tell what was a new station because it was all kind of blurring into one.
It's all blurring into one sort of like bad dream.
Literally into a nightmare. And then, so sometimes I would just remember, I'd go, hi, my name's Victoria. And then like, bang, my name's Victoria, my name is Victoria, my name is Victoria.
And then you finish a station, you're like, did I just say, hi, my name's Victoria for that entire 2 minutes?
On a loop, yeah.
All right, well, speaking about sort of how you kept yourself on track, any tips for managing stress throughout the interviews? What did you do? You said you were quite nervous in that waiting room. Anything else that helped that you could recommend to other students?
I think that I just tried to, even when there were questions that really threw me, like I remember in the MMI, there was one that was really difficult. And as I was talking, I'm thinking, this is rubbish. What are you saying? Like, I knew it was bad. I was also just trying to tell myself everyone would be finding this hard. And I think that's like the key. Like, this is a hard question. They're trying to throw you off with this, and everyone will be struggling. So I was just trying to remind myself of that and just act confident. So I was trying to keep a smile on my face and act like I really meant what I said, even though I knew this was terrible. And so I think that's the key to it. And just doing a lot of practice really helps. And then even when you have a bad run, just own it, basically.
Yeah.
Fake it till you make it. Right? Exactly.
So I suppose now we want to bring the conversation away from the interview and towards your preparation for that interview. So Vic, could you tell us what you did to prepare and what that was like for you?
So I actually did do the Fraser's comprehensive interview package. A big part of why I decided to do that was because, like I mentioned before, I had sat the GAMSAT 4 times across 4 years. And I was I had this feeling of like, you know what, I've done the GAMSAT that many times. If I'm lucky enough to get an interview, I really just don't want to let it slip through my fingers. Like I really had that feeling. And also I knew that I was like, oh, you know, I've done a lot of job interviews and, you know, I'm sure I'll interview well. But then again, once I actually looked into what an MMI really is like and what the medical interview process is like, I realized that this is actually very different to a standard job interview and that more preparation would be required than just sort of rocking up on the day.
Oh,
so,
yeah. I couldn't agree more. And, you know, I think you've brought up a brilliant point there about it being just a bit of its own sort of kettle of fish, really, like these weird medical interviews. And the stakes could not be higher, really, could they? I mean, job interviews are really important for a lot of people, but if you don't get a job, you just apply for another one, and hopefully, you know, there's many jobs in the similar field that you're after, whereas that GEMSAS interview is your only interview for that year, isn't it? So I can't imagine. Yeah, I can imagine, in fact. but yes, I know exactly how you feel, and there is a load of pressure riding on that particular interview. So you've talked about your experience with the Fraser's interview, and we are on the Fraser's podcast here. But just so we can keep our sponsors happy, how did you find the course, and you know would you recommend it and all that kind of thing? While we've got you here,
I actually definitely would recommend it because I found that doing the mock interviews in particular was extremely useful, because it meant that when I did get to that, especially that one on that platform, where like I had practiced looking into the camera, and I was used to being sort of thrown off and staying confident. And another thing that I thought was really useful that I gained from doing that Fraser's program was they taught me about frameworks and structures to use for all the different question types. So I did take the time to sort of learn them and practice them, and it just took like one step of thinking out of the process. And especially when you've got that timer ticking down, I think it's so important, because this was ages ago, but I had done an MMI before when I applied for like undergrad radiography or something, and I did it with no prep. I was like, I'll be fine. And yeah, it was just like, I'm sure what I said was okay, but it was just not structured at all. Whereas this time I went in with a very structured approach, and it just meant that I could focus on the actual, let's say, ethical scenario that was given, plugging it into the structure. And it just took time out of the equation, and it meant that what I was saying sounded more balanced and more thought through. And so, yeah, learning stuff like that and having the opportunity to practice it with good feedback and constructive criticism, I think I would really recommend it to anyone who can do it. I would say do it.
Exactly, because it's as much as the interview is about getting to know the candidate and, you know, seeing what you're like, if you're personable, if you have good communication skills. At the end of the day, there needs to be a system to dissecting all of these ethical problems. Like, you know, you don't rock up as a doctor or a medical student to the hospital and sort of be like, oh, you know, I've read Grey's Anatomy, I'm just going to wing it, you know, like I'm going to figure this out. But like there are protocols and there are guidelines, and, you know, it's exactly the same with the interviews. There are protocols and there are guidelines, and while your answer is unique and you have to be creative, you know that there are certain steps to analyzing any situation, and, you know, it's not good to reinvent the wheel, is it?
And I think the medical school itself is also looking to make sure that you have a logical framework for approaching problems, because that ultimately is what, you know, is going to lead to you then being able to logically approach medical problems that you need to dissect later on. In an online space, it's a bit different, but how did you go about dressing for your interview and that sort of thing? Was there anything different that you did?
Did you wear shorts, is the question.
No, I still took the dressing very seriously. Because I felt like, oh, this is something I can control. I did wear dress pants still. I know one of the Fraser's tutors had encouraged us to still dress the part and even like wear shoes, because you want to feel like you're in that real environment. Like don't get too comfortable and then like you'll get slack or whatever. So I did take that advice, and I'm kind of crazy. So every time I did a mock interview, I would literally wear this same outfit. I would do my hair the same, makeup the same. And yeah, would basically had practice in that exact same way, so that for the real thing, it felt more just comfortable and like a routine. I did still try and do sort of my hair and makeup and wear a nice sort of top, because I just wanted to try and, I guess, present myself as well as I could in this online format and stand out when it's so hard to stand out when they can only see a tiny portion of you.
Now that we've had a good, decent chat about the interview, let's get to the fun part. So after you finish the interview, it's quite nerve-wracking. What did you have going through your mind? Did you feel stressed afterwards, or was it like a massive relief?
I actually felt so relieved. I just remember closing the laptop screen and just like running, like releasing that adrenaline. Like it was the most satisfying laptop close of my life. And then I had actually, because this was peak Melbourne lockdown, where your family, like, you're not allowed to leave the house, and all my family were home, and I was like, no, you cannot be in the house listening, because they would have their ear up to the door listening, and I couldn't handle that pressure. So I made them go to the park and walk around the park for like 2 hours, because that's the only place they were allowed to go. So I called them and said, you can come home now. I just felt really relieved. And then my mind did want to go back to that one question that I mentioned was really hard, and I knew I didn't do that well. And I wanted to keep going over it and tell people, oh, this is what I said. Do you think that was okay? But then I'm just like, you know what? It's done. I think I would advise people to just try and forget about it. It's done now. And just be relieved and proud that you even got an interview. And
Did any of your friends also sit the interview, or just generally apply for medical school? Did you find that sort of the media space a bit difficult to handle after the interview?
Yeah, I had a friend. She didn't. She wasn't interviewing at ANU. She interviewed at Melbourne, actually. It was difficult because it was really great. We did our preparation together. She actually also did Fraser's, and we did a lot of our prep together, practice together and everything like that. It's difficult, even with the GAMSAT as well, preparing with friends, and then, someone's going to get a better score, and that can be really nasty. Luckily for us, she ended up getting into Sydney and I ended up getting into ANU, so it worked out well for both of us. And it's so weird contrasting our experiences, because she's already done like probably 3 or 4 blocks by now, and I'm just starting cardio resp.
And you'll all end up at the same point at the end.
Yeah.
Somehow. It's a winding road, but the destination we arrive at is the same. Yeah, absolutely. So any sort of recommendations, just like last sort of final thoughts on the interview process? Any words of wisdom from somebody who's already on the other side?
I guess I would say practice as much as you can. Try and have really structured answers. Don't just sort of waffle out and flow, whatever comes to mind. Don't just say it. Try and actually have a structure to your answer, and try and appear really balanced. Like for me, if it was an ethical or decision-making situation, the old me would have just been like, oh, that's easy, do this. But instead try and slow it down and be a bit more stepwise with your logic. Yeah, and I think otherwise just try and come off confident and smile a lot, because that's what I tried to do and probably would make a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it sounds as though you had a good friend who was also doing similar interview preparation as well. So you had some, other people around you to play ideas off as well. And I suppose there is an MMI at Uni Melb as well, so you're able to sort of work together on certain problems and things like that as well. So I suppose what I'm trying to get at there is that it's a team activity. Like, you don't need to prepare for your interviews in isolation. You've use the communities that are around you. Fraser's has an online community that you can be a part of. There are various other platforms where people can get involved with each other, and I think that's really important, because if you're alone and you're isolated, you're not really knowing what other people are doing, and at the end of the day, you need someone to give you feedback, honest, good feedback. Which sounds like you were able to get, Vic, from the Fraser's courses, but I'm sure you also did some preparation with your friends as well, which was a great addition to your preparation.
That's definitely right. Even I had a few friends who were already medical students in various sort of stages of the journey, and I asked them to. It was so scary doing practice in front of them, but I got some good feedback from them as well. So yeah.
And guys, if you have any questions as well, if you don't have any medical friends, unlike Vic here, who sounds really lucky, there's always people that you can contact at Fraser's as well. Most of the staff are people that have been through medical school or are currently in medical school at the moment. So there is a massive amount of people that you can plug into if you have any questions about specific universities.
Absolutely. Maybe we'll do an episode where we go through all the questions we get in our email box and have a chat about them.
Yeah, absolutely. So guys, remember to keep sending us some nice emails. We love to hear from you.
Exactly.
And if you have particular things that you want us to talk about, please do let us know.
Exactly. Alrighty, Vic. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure. I think I learned a lot about ANU.
Yeah, I'm jealous now. I want my Steph.
Yeah, it's still better. Good. And we'll see you around the traps, I guess.
Yeah, no doubt. Is your plan, Vic, to come back to Melbourne in future, or do you think you'll stay in Canberra?
Yeah, I think I'll end up coming back to Melbourne, so hopefully I'll see you guys around.
Yeah, we'll be competing for registrar jobs in no time.
Yeah.
Alrighty, and I think that's where we're going to leave it for today. Thanks for listening, guys, and thank you for your time, Vic.
Thank you.